I will start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Fraser. I'm the coordinator of the Core MD project. And as you know, we have a series of regular webinars, which are available afterwards also on our website. I'm just going to share the screen for a moment and introduce them, just to remind you that we will record this and it will be available on our website. And we're using Zoom, so the participants are in lecture mode, which means you can ask questions, but only by writing through the Q&A. And we really would welcome that, and we will try and answer all the questions during the session. If there are any technical issues, you can use that to send us messages as well. And Jean-Baptiste Ruffet from EFORT, who coordinates these sessions for us technically, will help you with that as well. And I can remind you that through the website, you can get access to the details of other webinars that we've held and that we will be holding. And you can also find more information for us, for example, through our newsletter. These are just for information, some of the webinars that are already available. And you can use this QR code or the website. I'll just leave it up for a moment if you would like to look at the list and get direct access to review them afterwards. Now, today's session is a little unusual compared with some of the others. It's quite a specific topic, looking at IT tools for regulatory science. And we all know that one of the priorities, one of the primary needs of clinicians for the evidence-based use of medical devices is transparency of evidence both before and after market access. Within Europe and the new system under the medical device regulation, the production of the EUDAMED portal and database, which will be so important, has been delayed. And the clinical module is going to be the last component of EUDAMED to become available, and that may still be another few years from now. So in the meantime, Enrico Caiani and Yi-Jun Ren, working within our consortium in Milan, have developed an interesting search engine, which they're going to describe to us today. And then we're going to hear from colleagues, both professional and regulatory within the European system, about their perspective on how we find evidence for devices and how this tool or an equivalent search engine could be very helpful in future, what the problems might be, and perhaps how it can be sustainable. So that's the end of my introduction. I shall stop sharing, and it's a pleasure to invite Enrico Caiani from the Politecnico di Milano to describe his platform and his title for this presentation. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alan. I am sharing my screen. Tell me when...
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk about what we have done in the context of the Core MD project, as Alan nicely introduced. So the medical device regulation has introduced important changes in respect to the previous directive towards an increased safety of medical devices and related benefits for patient health. And here are some of the main novelties listed that will be also recalled more in detail in the following slides. In particular, to increase investigation requirements, expert panels composed by medical experts have been introduced as part of a conformity assessment procedure for Class 3 and some Class 2 medical device categories to scrutinize clinical evidence submitted by manufacturers through the clinical evaluation consultation procedure. And this process has two steps. Within 21 days of receiving the dossier from a notified body, as also we will listen more explicitly later from other panelists, a screening panel within the expert panels decides if proceeding or not with the examination of the dossier on the basis of three criteria: the novelty and possible major impacts, changes in the benefit risk profile in that specific category or group of device, and significant increased rate of serious incidents reported for that category or group of devices. In case of a positive decision, an opinion needs to be delivered to the notified body within 60 days from the beginning of the whole process. In the concept of reinforcing surveillance, the MDR prescribes that different sources and actions need to be put in place by manufacturers along the medical device life cycle. And these actions include post-market surveillance, not only focused on reactive approach, but also with a proactive focus on searching additional information from different sources. And among them, the different national databases of safety notices could be utilized in order to derive trends in alerts and adverse events in similar products on the market or for specific categories of devices. These two scenarios, expert panels and post-market proactive surveillance, are just examples in which there is a potential need for data aggregation tool to generate new values for regulatory purposes from already existing open access information relevant to medical device malfunctions. However, several barriers are limiting the automation of this process, not only among different extra-EU market jurisdictions, but also among the 27 European countries, such as the usage of different definitions, different reporting criteria, no common reporting forms, multiple languages and alphabets, different reporting timelines, different nomenclatures, and multiple UDI systems, in particular among extra-EU systems. To reduce this ambiguity in the way manufacturers need to report their data in the EU member states, the MDR established a common way to describe the medical devices by introducing the European Medical Device Nomenclature, or EMDN, derived from the Italian classification system. As you can see in this example, this is formed by a hierarchical tree structure starting with a category of a medical device, in which different levels describe more and more precisely the specific medical device to aim for a univocal and precise classification. In addition, as Alan was introducing, the creation of a European database of medical devices goes into the direction of enhancing transparency and improving coordination among different stakeholders and sources of information. UDOMED will be based on 6 interconnected modules, where the first 3 are already available and the last 3 are still under construction. However, it is not clear which systems and processes will be implemented to monitor the data that will be available for the identification of trends, patterns, or signals for risk analysis as stated by the MDR. For sure, there will be some limitations using UDOMED for these purposes, as no historical data will be included, so some years will have to pass from the activation of the remaining modules before any trend or pattern could be evaluated. Also, UDOMED will include only information relevant to medical devices on the EU market, with no links to other jurisdictions or visibility of medical device malfunctions reported outside Europe. In this context, within the CoreMD project, our aim was to develop a first pilot of an IT tool with aim to automatically collect publicly available curated regulatory information about alerts and recalls from the official websites of EU competent authorities, as well as from non-EU regulatory authorities in a single database, to attribute a proper EMDN classification to the medical devices relevant to each of these records, to allow multiple queries to the generated database, and to display results in both an aggregated way for capturing possible trends, as well as in detail for further analysis. To do so, we started examining which of the EU member states, through their dedicated websites, was providing open access information about medical device malfunctions. And we found 15 states with a periodical update of safety notices on their website, plus Portugal that provided aggregated reports. So our initial focus was on these 16 countries. These are examples of the information available on the websites reporting medical device problems. In some cases, the data are structured in fields, in other cases are not. And as a first step to generate our local database, we built country-specific web scraping approaches to automatically extract data from available public web pages. However, to allow searching the database for specific devices or category of devices, we need to identify within this text the manufacturer and the device names, as well as the most proper associated EMDN code. And you can imagine this process is not straightforward due to unstructured information, the lack of a reference list of device on each market, different nomenclatures, and different languages, sometimes even different alphabets. And to overcome these problems, we defined a framework of operation applying some AI method, in particular natural language processing. I put here 2 citations. If you are more interested to the technicalities, please refer to these papers in order to understand more in depth our strategies. In particular, after web scraping, named entity recognition, a subtask of information extraction that seeks to locate and classify name entities mentioned in a structured test into predefined categories, was applied to identify manufacturer and device names. Then, entity resolution was used to identify and match data records that refer to the same medical device across multiple data sources. And we also used as a reference a publicly available list of devices in the Italian market with the Italian classification system available so that the EMDN code could then be retrieved from the medical devices in each matched record. Finally, some nomenclature mapping strategies were applied, and a graphical user interface was provided for data search and analysis. As a result of the application of such framework to the EU countries, we included in our database more than 60,000 safety notices, with the highest number from Germany, as you can see from graph. You may also notice that the span time of the available data for each country was different, with always information retrieved from Ireland, 2002. On average, our strategy of assigning the EMDN code resulted feasible in 61% of these documents, reaching a peak of 76% for Spain and minimum values for Estonia and Greece. We were also conducting a validation for the automatically assigned EMD code, considering a subset of safety notices for the different countries, and results show a very good performance, which obviously decreased with the level of detail in the EMD code, but generally remaining greater than 90% of correctness up to level 3. We also applied our framework to some extra EU countries, as you can see here, that resulting in additional 69,000 safety notices added to our database, with an MDN assignment of about 51% on average for these extra EU countries. Considering the total number of safety notices with assigned EMDN code, here their distribution based on the medical device category is shown. The largest number of retrieved safety notices was relevant to category Z, followed by the ones relevant to the in vitro diagnostic medical devices. High-risk devices that are focus of the core MD project, here evidenced in red as categories C, J, and P, followed in the list, with high numbers found also for categories A and L. Let's now take a look to the developed platform with a live demo. So I need to switch. Please let me know if you are.
Yes, we see it. Enrico,
Perfect.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So this is the user interface of our platform. And in the central portion of the screen, you can see the different countries included in the database, each with a number of retrieved safety notices and the last automatic update of the information. Scrolling down, the distribution over time for each country is showed. And if we exclude the USA from the this panel, the trends for other countries become more visible. Then the cumulative distribution of each country is reported, together with the percentage of safety notices relevant to medical devices, in vitro medical devices, and active implantable medical devices, as well as the total number per year and per month. Acting on the left bar with the possible filters and selecting a specific country, for example, and selecting now Italy, this will update all the visualized information relevant to the Italian country. On the bottom, the list of the records and structured information present in our database, according to the selected active filters, is shown. And so here you can see each record characterized by the country of origin of information, in this case is Italy, the name of the manufacturer, the device, the type of device, the action, date, the retrieved EMDN code, and a URL that I can click, and this will go back to the original website, in this case is the Health Ministry of Health, with the corresponding record, and where I can access the full information, in this case in a PDF form. Coming back to the other possible filters, it is possible to select a specific manufacturer from the list or just acting in the search bar. The same for the device. We can select the type of device, as I said before, and the type of action. So, for example, if I want to focus on more urgent cases like immediate action or recall, now the database will visualize just these actions among all the member states or extra EU states selected. And I can also consider only safety notices with assigned EMDN code. So again, I can also focus more on a specific EMDN, so limiting our research to a specific device group, for example, by selecting the implanted prosthetic and osteosynthetic devices, and then going on selecting the second level, for example, vascular and cardiac prosthesis, and then again the third level, vascular and cardiac endoprosthesis. And finally, if I want to go in more detail, I can just select endoprosthesis. And here are the results of the final selection, which in this case will include 94 different records. We can also limit this by putting a filter on the data, for example, limiting to the last year. And in this case, we can see that in the last year, in our database, there are 8 recalls concerning this specific category of devices. So going back now to the presentation to conclude. And how could we use these query results? Well, for example, a possible use could be to analyze the related PDF documents in order to attribute the IMDF adverse event nomenclature, as it can be seen in this example, where the code relevant to unsealed device packaging could be attributed by reading the full document and in particular referring to the highlighted text. And this, we think, could provide an improved understanding of the peculiar risks related to a specific category of devices and may be also useful for safety signal detection. An additional possible use we are investigating together with other partners of the CoreMD consortium would be the combined analysis of information from medical registries of implanted devices with information obtainable from our database in order to extract features or patterns that could help in an earlier detection of the outliers in these registries without waiting for 1 or more years in order to be detected. So in conclusion, the availability of tools based on natural language processing can help dealing with partially unstructured and partially incomplete information, such as those provided by the safety notices, to generate new potential value for regulatory purposes. And such tool could fill the temporal gap until EUDAMED will become fully operational and beyond by providing an historical records and also linking different jurisdictions. So with this, I have concluded my presentation. And thank you for your attention. And also thank to all the people here listed that contributed to this work.
Thank you very much, Enrico, to you and your team, and congratulations on all the detailed insights that this resource is now going to provide, because not only will you be able to fulfill those functions that you've just mentioned and provide a historical database of records, but also give us an oversight into what these records mean and whether they're useful in a way that we haven't had access to before. Now, there are a couple of specific questions for you. Firstly, from Danielle Giroux, or her account from Switzerland, a software engineer called Yakma. Did you use Python or JavaScript or whatever else for these tools? A quick technical question for you or Yijun.
Well, also Yijun can reply. We used some Python-based natural language processing routines and also transformer models, which are pre-trained language models that were fine-tuned to the aim of what we were trying to achieve.
Yijun, do you want to add to that, or do you agree with Enrico?
I agree. I just want to add that for the tool, for the development of the platform, we use for now the Flutter, so the data programming language, which is more flexible.
So thank you. And I'm sure if there are technical questions that colleagues want to share, we could also answer those afterwards if they contact us. And then this is for you, Enrico. David Epstein within our consortium is asking, how do you know if the data are representative within each country, or is there any evidence to suggest bias in reporting or in the documents that you can discover?
Well, actually, these are the documents that are published on the official websites of the national authorities. So if there is a bias, is not due to how we collect the information, but this is how manufacturers eventually transmit documents to the national authorities and how the national authorities publish these documents. But we get what we find.
So, David, there may not be an easy answer to that. Please come back with a supplementary question at the end, if you like, within the general discussion. And then there are other colleagues asking how they can use the tool, and they like it. But I suggest we come back to that at the end when we talk about sustainability and the future directions, because there are more general questions about transparency within the European system that we might tackle together. So thank you very much. And now we're going to hear a couple of viewpoints from potential users of this system or from those who organize and act within the expert panel system, which includes, as we've heard, the need to try and check sometimes whether or not there's a reported series of problems with an individual device. So we're going to hear first from Miguel Antunes from the European Medicines Agency, who's responsible for managing the expert panels with his colleagues, and then from Rob Nelissen, who's an academic orthopedic surgeon within our consortium from the University of Leiden, who is a leader of one of the panels. So over to you, Miguel and Rob. I think you've got a joint presentation. We look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. We did prepare a couple of slides, but I would like to start by thanking the organization of CoreMD, especially Professor Alan Fraser, for the invitation to take part in this panel. It's very interesting for us to debate these topics, and especially the practical impact that it might have on the work of the expert panels. So I don't know if Jean-Baptiste, if I should share the slides or you, I just need to open the presentation. We should always start with that.
I was going to suggest that, Rob, you explain while Miguel is getting set up your role in the system.
Well, yes, as you pointed out, Alan, thank you for and Enrique for the very nice presentation, which can be very valuable. Well, here the presentation. I think it's nice that Miguel starts first.
But your title within the expert panel system, Rob, your role?
Yeah, well, my role, I'm appointed now for the second time as chair of the thematic panel, orthopedics, trauma, rehabilitation, and rheumatology. We have 11 expert panels. The other one is cardiovascular, dentistry, general surgery, OBGYN, etc. You can look it up at the EU website. Well, I think it's good that Miguel now shares what we are doing in the system.
Yes,
Miguel.
And then we come back to you. Over to you again, Miguel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Apologies, I didn't have the presentation open, but Professor Nelissen already gave a very good overview of what the expert panels are and where they are currently working. So, and not to go into much into detail, the expert panels do provide and are mandated by both the MDR and the IVDR, the medical device regulations, to provide several types of advice. So they have a different advisory role in different capacities. Today, and for this topic, it's particularly relevant, one of those advisory functions, which is under the clinical evaluation consultation procedure, what we call the CECP for short. And in this particular case, it applies to specific high-risk medical devices, which are class 3 implantable devices or a particular type of class 2B active devices, the ones that are intended to administer or remove medicinal products. Actually, a first part of Rule 12 of the MDR. And so for these types of devices, the expert panels provide an opinion on the notified body's assessment of the clinical evaluation that they have provided during the conformity assessment of those medical devices. There are certain exemptions that the notified body needs to consider before submitting its own assessment for the panels, and those can be exempted, which means there are particularities, meaning, for instance, if there is a renewal of the certification under the MDR, or if the same manufacturer keeps the same intended purpose for the device, or the modification does not affect the benefit-risk ratio, or if there are already common specifications available for a certain type of device. So in those cases, those procedures, those processes do not need to be submitted for the consultation procedure. However, if that's not the case, then we go into the first phase of this consultation procedure, which is the screening phase. And here there is a screening panel that assesses the need to produce an opinion for a specific device, or that could also become something that is relevant for a type of device or group of devices. So that decision on whether or not an opinion is needed is based on 3 criteria. The first criteria is based on the novelty and the major or clinical or health impact that that device can bring. And this is very unique to the device that is being assessed. So this is something that if the screening panel decides that an opinion is needed, would only be applicable to that specific device and the novelty and the impact that it might have. However, if we talk about criterion 2, we are already talking about something that could be applicable to a group of devices, because it has the basis is when there are valid health concerns due to adverse change of the benefit risk profile of a group of devices. So it's something that either the the experts can bring on their own information that they are aware of, or it's something that the Secretariat via the network that has been set up with specifically directly with the European Commission and the MDCG and the several groups can bring this information to the experts, and then it can also be used for a decision that an opinion would be needed. In case criterion 2 is used for justifying the issue of an opinion, not only that device would be up for that process, but also all devices that are similar would also require an opinion. And the same is applicable for criterion 3. So it's a more general criterion. It applies to groups or categories of devices, and this is directly linked to the vigilance process. So whenever it's identified a significant increase in serious incidents for a particular category of products or type of products, this is also a criterion that could be used for to trigger the issuing of an opinion. That being the case, if one of these or even more than one is used for the decision to issue an opinion, one is provided by one of the thematic panels. That opinion is published on the Commission's website, so it's publicly available. In a certain phase, there is some reduction of information due to commercially confidential information, which may, at the end of the conformity assessment procedure, be a little bit less redacted, because, of course, this assessment changes in time, and the notified body needs to give due consideration to this opinion. In terms of results and the criterion that were used for the issuing of an opinion, I have them summarized here in the table. So in total, so far, 10 opinions were issued in total since the expert panels have been made operational. 5 of them belong to the circulatory system, 2 in the orthopedics panel, 2 in the general and plastic and dentistry panel, and 1 in neurology. And in terms of the criterion that was used, you can see that the majority of them, so 8, were based on this novelty criteria. So they were considered highly innovative devices that would have an impact either on specific individuals' health or even on more of a general approach in terms of treatment for a disease. Whereas for the remaining 2, criterion 2 was used, meaning that it was identified that might be specific concerns regarding certain types of devices that the screening experts considered that all the devices from that category should be further assessed, and an opinion should be issued. That is the case for a specific group of shoulder prostheses, and that was also the case for reabsorbable hernia surgical meshes. Criterion 3 was not used so far to trigger an opinion. So these are some practical numbers and results, and I will hand over to Professor Nelissen for a practical and clinical overview of the topic. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you, Miguel. So I think the tool which has been presented by Caiani and his group is what he was already talking about. It's more like a proactive approach. I think the system, the MBR, aims to have a lot of new innovative devices on the market, but it has to be safe. And there was always some blind spots, to put it more in a philosophical way. And of course, the data provided can be, well, since we have tools around like this tool presented, gives us more information of devices. But what he also stressed in his presentation is that we need a common way, a way of the defining implants, like the common nomenclature. That's essential, what we are showing. Because you can imagine, at least in orthopedics, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, we have some recent events on implants which are given a certain name, But when you go into detail, there's several subgroups. So for a certain knee implant, there were 9 different subgroups while the name was the same. And we call it camouflage. So it's very essential that we have first addressed the global, even beyond the EU, that's my aim, a global nomenclature. And the EMDN is one thing. And then we can have a proactive approach. It's what Miguel Antunes was showing. I was involved in one of those evaluations. And then about the health concerns. And it's of course not meant to be, but the more information we have, the better we can give our reports in the consultation role we have as the thematic panel. I think that's what I can say. Again, innovation essential, but patient safety is even more important.
So thank you very much, Rob. And I think you can stop sharing the screen now, Miguel, and we have a couple of quick questions, perhaps. You've highlighted the criteria that are being used to select whether or not an expert scientific opinion is used. And I know I've discussed this with you previously, but we could air it publicly. How do you and your colleagues within the regulatory agencies identify health concerns currently without an operating database with a long back catalogue of events and problems? So I think you said you use the Vigilance Committee of Regulators, but does it have a comprehensive searchable database, or are they relying on us as clinicians to report individual events to our national regulatory agencies?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, we do use the information that is already triaged and analyzed by the MDCG Vigilance Group, because it's where we rely on the assessment that is done by all the national agencies. So it's information that is already, I would say, very reliable in terms of vigilance. So it was information that was signaled, processed, analyzed, and it has some then it should be also addressed in terms of some outcomes. Vigilance systems are never perfect. None of the ones that are used in health all have their biases and their problems, and they sometimes capture too much information, and then the analysis is very difficult to do, or they are not representative. They don't capture enough information. So it's very difficult to find a balance. I think that they are one of the tools that should be used to highlight safety issues. They don't replace necessarily other mechanisms like dedicated studies or registries or other sources of information that can nicely complement these sources of information. This being said, it's definitely important that we have this link for the expert panels to decide with this basis of confidence that there is, as mandated as mentioned in the MDR, possibly an increase in the reporting of incidents that was already assessed by the correct bodies, and then we do have some to act on that, and definitely expert panels can provide some additional support on actions that might be needed and to address clinically and scientifically the recommendations to contain a little bit that risk. Thank you.
So thank you. I don't think you disagree that there is not a comprehensive systematic system that you can use, although you do use these channels. There is scope for development in future. Now, before we go to Sanjeev Yoganathan for the regulatory perspective, I'd like to ask Enrico one question and then Rob one question briefly too. Enrico, there was a question in the chat to ask why there's such a difference in numbers of reports from different regulatory agencies. In particular, why is Germany so large? I think it's partly due to the different duration, but
yeah,
also
in fact,
what is available on the market. Perhaps you could explain that. And then afterwards, Rob, could I ask you if you feel that you have access within the expert panels to sufficient evidence of the type that Enrico showed? So Enrico first on the variability between national databases.
Sure. So what we could access and retrieve as the depth in terms of time that is allowed by the public databases. So in case of Germany, the data was available in the last 19 years. So if we divide that total for 19, it comes out 780 documents per year, which is not so far, for example, from Italy, where we have 640. And for example, Ireland, which is a very long availability for 2002, comes out 350. So I think this is also reflecting the population and the number of devices that are available on the different EU markets. Not the same devices available in all European states. And according to the usage, there could be more malfunctions that are highlighted. If less usage, there would be in some way less also safety notices published. This is our explanation.
Okay, thank you. And Rob, do you want to make a brief comment about whether or not you feel there is a good method of accessing the information that you would like and need?
Well, that's a good point, of course. We talked about this, of course, for the last few years several times. I think the more information you get, the better it is. So when I did this, we had the clinical evaluation assessment report from the industry, where that data are available from that industry, and also registry data, which are independent. But nowadays, with all the new tools around, it's very easy to get more data in. So I think the more data you have, the better you can make your judgment. And what's the validity of the information provided? So I think this, as an add-on, I think it's a really nice asset. But again, the nomenclature, that's, I think, a big challenge, but that's a global challenge. I think that's mainly, otherwise we're having different...
We may come back to that in the general discussion for everybody's views. So now it's my pleasure, thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce Sanjeev Yoganathan, who is with the Danish regulatory agency DKMA, and he has a responsibility for surveillance, I think, amongst other things, but he's going to give us his perspective. And I should thank him also for being one of the regulatory agencies who are helping us within the Core MD project. So Sanjeev, over to you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Alan, and good afternoon to everyone tuning in for listening to this talk at this time of the day. I think it's almost afternoon. Thank you, Alan. As you said, I'm from the Danish Medicines Agency. I'm Sanjeev. I work in the unit of market surveillance within the division of medical devices. I'm also part of the Core MD project, along with our director of division, Yoganathan. We are co-chairing the work package, one of the work packages with Rob Nelissen. And it's a pleasure to be here and to actually discuss the use of data and specifically how we can identify the real-world data sources and real-world evidence utilization. Maybe I should start sharing my screen. Just a moment.
That's fine. We see it if you can go to the full screen and then
I guess it should be there.
That's it. Thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, great. We just saw the IT tool from Enrico, and some of the content that I will be discussing will be in that topic as well. So as a beginning, why even consider real world evidence and what is it exactly? And I guess a lot of us know the difference between the uses of data, just the raw data, real world data, and then the understanding and the evidence extract from the data, which is the real world evidence. But the problem is that there are a lot of different data sources available, and not all of them are considered to be a real-world data or real-world evidence data source. So as per the regulatory agency, as ourselves, we have a lot of different data sources when it comes to incident reportings or when it comes to the market surveillance for the medical devices. So it's about to understand the specific data sources that we have available in our agency. And one of the data sources that we do have available is all the extracted data from the incident reporting that we receive from the manufacturers, but also the incident we receive directly from the healthcare providers, or it could be the citizens, the actual users of the devices at home. And also we do have sources from the field safety corrective action or the field safety notices, as Enrico was talking about. As I see it, it's important to identify all these different data sources that are available, but also specify what type of analysis needs you have from the data. It's not only important to understand that we have 5 different data sources available, but it's also important to figure out what we need to and why we need to extract something out of it before we talk about the very important topic all of us talk about, is the data quality. A lot of time the data quality is considered to be pretty bad, but there is no such thing as a bad data quality as long as you can use it for that specific need. So it's more of understanding the use case rather than giving the blame to the data quality. And it's really important to understand that I have a question mark right after real world evidence in this figure. And the problem is that not all of the elements of these data sources are considered to be real world evidence, because there is a difference between the vigilance system itself, which is a pretty well established system and within the MDR and within the EU Commission, and then the real world evidence, which is something that is extracted from the clinical information or the medical information from the usage of the specific data. So it's quite important to understand which of the content from these data sources are considered the real world evidence, and what else do we need to implement in our system to utilize all this evidence and all the relevant elements of the different data sources. This also yields to the difference between the other types of data sources, which is not really only considered when it comes to the vigilance part, but also the market surveillance itself. And market surveillance in our MDR term is usually when it comes to compliance issues or anything that is not directly considered to be part of the safety of the device itself, but everything else which is more of a compliance issue or something that is stated required in the MDR. That could be the CEF or the compliance exchange forms, which gives us a lot of information about what actually occurred in a different member state within the EU Commission of a specific device. And a lot of the times it will be compliance issues, but some of the times we also see that beside a compliance issue, there could be a risk factor or an actual impact on the patient itself that could be used as a source to identify any specific signals within this data. And we also have a lot of registries available. Not all of them are really utilized, but we need to improve the utilization of these data sources to understand what is actually happening with a specific device on the specific markets, but also across the EU markets. And I've stated that we need to have a risk-based approach, and I guess that all of the member states do already have a risk-based approach. But there is a difference between which type of risk that we assess when it comes to the medical device assessment, and how many types of data sources that we include when we when we assess the information with a risk-based approach. PMCF is well known as a real world evidence, since it is a post-market clinical follow-up that is quite similar to the RCTs, but it is something that has to be considered by the manufacturers when the device has entered the market, and they need to follow up on the clinical performance and the clinical follow-up for the medical device, which usually gives it a good indication of how a specific device performs in the market. So there's a difference between when you perform an RCT before the entrance of the market and right after the market. The performance could vary, so you need to make sure that you collect information that is sufficient enough for, as a regulator, to understand how a specific device performs across the market, not only to a specific incident, but across all of the incidents. Some of the challenges that we face in our agency, and I guess all of the member states and all of the agencies, is the acquisition of relevant data beside some of the sources that I already mentioned. Could be clinical specific data or the medical data when it comes to a specific patient. Could be understanding how a different medical device perform on a patient with X amount of diseases or diagnosis, when compared to another patient with some different diagnosis. So it's specifically important to understand that there are a lot of knowledge from the patient history or the medical medical data from a specific patient. And I'm not really digging too much into a specific patient when it comes to all this anonymization issue. I'm more interested in the different diagnosis a specific patient with the device has compared to another patient, rather than this specific patient and who he is or who she is. It's more of a comparison between the different track history of the medical implications for the specific patient, rather than anything else. And it's also important to understand if we need to establish more data sources within our agencies or across the agencies in the EU Commission, because right now we have some proper data sources that we are already using, but we need to utilize them, utilize the data, and to understand how we can utilize this data. Perhaps we need to establish more databases and data sources that has the specific data that we need for this utilization. And of course, we need to have some harmonization across the market. It's important to understand that all of the member states are assessing these signals in a proper way. We're actually right now in the EU Commission, there is a new project established. It's the Joint Action for Market Surveillance. And our agency, along with all of the member states, are part of the project to identify the signals in medical device vigilance and specify what the signals are and how we can have an harmonization across the market on how we assess these signals, and of course to have a definition of what a signal actually is. So I think some of the challenges within the harmonization will be solved right after that project, but the project will be a 3 years project. So of course we need to face the challenges already now to be able to improve the approach for a data-driven method. In our agency, we've already started with the basics when it comes to a data-driven approach. We've started with some easy-to-use data sources, which is, of course, the simple data source as the data from the manufacturer's incident reports and the information from the same FSN as Enrico talked about, and of course the FSA is just a field safety corrective action, and then there will be a field safety notice along with that. What we have tried to do is to build a signal detection system, which is based on the RMDF coding, along with the combination of the EMDN and GMDN codings, which are the biggest or the most used nomenclature system as of now. Of course, will be merged towards EMDN later on, but right as of now, we see a lot of devices with the GMDN nomenclature as well. And there are different levels within this hierarchy of the devices. So we've built a system that can identify a specific device within the same hierarchy, so we can assess all the incident reports based on these rules. And these rules are based on, of course, the extraction of the knowledge that we have from the databases. And we have also implemented some NLP tools along with the usage of large language models, specifically a masked language model that we have used to identify the severity of the impact on a specific patient, along with all the implications that a patient has received in all of our incident reports. By that, we assume that we can start exploring more of some real-world data sources and starting to extract more real-world evidence from the different data sources. But this also gives the opportunity for us to explore to start exploring more data sources that can be used as a real-world evidence in later on, and this is a work that we have prioritized and started to put more resources on lately, and will we continue to do that in the next year to identify what are the actual registries that are important to use, which we have also discussed in the CORE-MD consortium. And just as a conclusion, start using your data. Quality is never sufficient when it comes to that you haven't identified the need. But if you have identified a specific need, a specific use case, then the quality could be actually sufficient for that need. Of course, it cannot be expanded to all the needs we need, but the registry do have a lot of knowledge already. Start using them. Start figure out what we need to get out of it and why we need to get something out of it. Then we can start improving the data. And the CORE-MD tool is actually a great proof of data exploration and data exploitation. Beforehand, we didn't really have a cross-market understanding of how the field safety notices were issued and what of the issues was with different medical devices. But with the tool, it gives a great understanding of figuring out all the signals for, let's say, a pacemaker. And that information can be used directly into our internal vigilance system to understand that there is an issue with this specific device, with this exact EMDN code, and with the mapping of the codes, we could understand how the incident reports in our database has been performed and all the issues with those. And then we can merge the information to even look further to analyze the data to understand when we need to react. And I also state that there is a difference between the analyzing the data versus the understanding of the analysis. From a data scientist perspective, it's quite easy to perform a lot of different data analysis, but the problem is the interpretation of the analysis has to be quite specific, and it requires a lot of qualification from the assessors within the regulatory agency to understand what is actually the result of the analysis and how can we actually use this as a signal detection tool, or to figure out if there are any specific issues with the medical device. So it's all about the user needs. So the tools that will be implemented has to fulfill the needs for the users, as well as exploiting some of the data that is outside of the needs and qualification of the assessors.
So thank you very much, Sanjeev, for that interesting perspective. And it's clear that regulators are working a lot already on all sorts of overlapping initiatives. Sorry, did you want to make one more comment on your last edition on this?
No, yeah. I actually took this from Enrico, and just a quotation that we need for data aggregation tools to generate new value from existing information, potentially useful for different purposes. And it's exactly the point that we need to explore the data sources that we have available already, which is a lot of the time publicly available. Some of the data sources could be more hidden or something that is proprietary, but just let explore the publicly available data so that as a beginning, and then we can figure out how we can improve the users later on.
Perhaps we could thank you very much, and perhaps we could come to you, Enrico, first. We have about 15 minutes, and there are a lot of questions. The first few questions were about access to the tool. And I know that you and your team are still developing it. And I know that we've had a lot of discussions about sustainability. And it's interesting to hear that regulators are now overlapping with their own initiatives. Can you tell us what your vision would be in a perfect world of where this would develop? And apart from collecting the reports, I think you've idea of looking at their content. And what about the medical literature as well? Because a single universal tool that collected all of this, a Google for medical devices or some other search engine is available, might be the sort of prospect. What do you think?
Well, from a research point of view, there is a lot to do still. First, to improve our tool, also to assign MDN code in the percentage of records in which we are not capable to. And I think a development in NLP will help a lot. The same as generating new algorithms to go more into the PDF documents in order to, for example, automated assessment of a IMDRF code, as Sanjeev was telling before. So we are working on this in terms of research. Of course, sustainability is important because research is usually funded. So until research is funded, people are paid. When research is not funded anymore, we have to find other ways to sustain the project because we believe in it. Actually, we are trying to find additional parallel paths in creating a potential startup in Italy in order to exploit this, more referred not to regulators, but to the private companies. So we know that post-market surveillance is part of the activities that every company manufacturer of medical devices to do. So our idea is to try to see if we can find money in order to keep continuity on this and to provide a service for companies. And of course, we can also have agreements with regulators to make them using this tool and help us in developing it and to leave this tool be used for more, let's say, public health policy.
So for those who are asking when it would be available, the answer is that we cannot give a definitive answer yet, but at the end of this consortium, we will have more information about whether or not it's going to be developed commercially or academically. And we're exploring both of those options currently. Is that correct?
Yes.
In a simple summary. Okay. Now, would anyone like to talk about how to assess the quality of the data? Because people are asking not just about the quantity of the reports, but how can we check whether or not we're discovering data that is useful and sufficiently detailed? Rob, did you want to address that?
So I can actually. Currently, is a project between Enrico Caiani's group and people in Leiden, and also Bella, who moved to Delft, about the external validity. That's the whole issue, of course. So what we try to do, the safety notices found by the tool from Enrico Caiani, see in the registries whether those implants have indeed a higher revision rate. And of course, you may say revision rate for orthopedic implants like hip, knee, shoulder, etc. That's at least that's a clear endpoint. And the orthopedic registries are very well developed. Scandinavia, UK, Wales, the Netherlands, just name it. 99% completeness, also on the endpoint revision, 98% completeness. That would be a very nice way. But that's, of course, also one of the questions is, what's the nominator and denominator? I think the answer would be the fact that the tool gives us a signal, already gives us urge to look into more detail. But in the near future, I would expect, when we have also this external validity, because when it is due to packaging, that implant will not be implanted. That can be also a signal, of course, from the tool. So coming back to your question, I think external validity, external validation of the tool with real-world data like registry data, that's the first step, and that's being done at this very moment.
Thank you. Enrico and Yejun, there is a question in the chat from Carol Robin that I think you can probably answer with a written answer if you have time. Could I go to a question for you, Sanjeev, from Maziar Mohadis, asking if you've got any local legal issues or barriers when you're collecting data for surveillance and vigilance in Europe, if I've interpreted the question correctly. How do you deal with that with your fellow regulators?
There are, of course, a lot of legal issues when it comes to data collection and the uses of data which is patient-specific. But what we use as of now is data that is not really patient-specific. It is anonymized somehow. But we would want to implement more tools to incorporate registry data, which do have some patient-specific data. But what we are trying to do is collaborating with the national health authorities and the national health data authorities to figure out how we can exclude some of the patient data from the specific registries to incorporate that data that we need to let's say implant registry, so we can actually use it in our vigilance system. So we are trying to face these issues by excluding data that is way too patient specific and try to put a lot of anonymization into it. Of course, you cannot perform specific anonymization that is 100% anonymized, but I guess it's a trade-off to patient safety and of course patient rights.
But we do need a system whereby registries allow us to work back to individual patients in the case of new major problems. That's why we have UDI, unique device identification. So at some stage, there are issues still to be resolved in the granularity of the data that goes into registries that allows individual patients to be contacted in the case of problems, but does not become publicly available. So I'm sure those issues are being considered, but clearly they're needed. I think it takes us on to the question of nomenclature, and perhaps I could come back to you, Enrico. There is European nomenclature now that was developed from Italian nomenclature, and there's a different coding system used by the FDA. And Daniel Giroux is saying that the IMDRF is now implemented a coding mechanism. So how are we going to reach a joint system where there should not be the problem of trying to match the American and the European system? And we're asked if there's any work being done to streamline between these two coding systems. So perhaps you can describe the meeting that you've had with the team working on this within the US.
Yes, thank you.
For
Thank you for your
WHO.
question. Thank you, Alan. Well, actually, it's still a problem. We have two systems that use two different coding. And also, by the way, other European member states were using this coding before. So this also is a problem for the past documentation, which refers sometimes to GMDN and not to EMDN. For example, France was using GMDN, if I'm not wrong. And so there are some attempts, some are sponsored by the WHO. There are some American companies that are working on that. Actually, there is also a European initiative which is led by Italy, if I'm not wrong, in the attempt to create a mapping with GMDN and to update the current EMDN, to keep updated the current EMDN nomenclature. Why EMDN nomenclature was chosen? Because it's free, while GMDN is owned by a private organization. And so this also makes difficult to build a direct mapping. So we have tried to build the first, let's say, solution, which has some percentage of, let's say, success. Is not perfect, it's not easy to map these two nomenclatures, but we are working on, and probably we will collaborate with the Italian government and the Italian region, which is in charge of this, in order to improve what we have and try to make a real mapping solution for these systems. We don't forget there are other nomenclatures, not only these two, but of course we have to start from these two, which has remained utilized, and in particular as Europeans, we want to map EMDN with these other systems.
Thank you. I think it's useful to know that there are initiatives to try to harmonize or to cross-reference between the different coding systems for medical devices, because really the objective of UDI is that there should be a single system and a single identifier for each device worldwide. And I think all the regulators would agree with that. In fact, Danielle has corrected me that I misunderstood her message, and she was asking also about the coding of adverse events in a standard manner and not just about the medical device nomenclature. And I think we'd all agree that that's necessary as well. And the IMDRF has worked quite hard on categories for coding adverse events that we're aware of. Do you want to comment
Absolutely.
on that, or can we just mention it briefly in passing and come to another topic?
This coding needs to be applied by everybody and to be present in every document, and also the manufacturers has to use these codes and put them into the safety notices. And this will allow a faster way of summarizing and organizing and analyzing the data later. If they're not used.
Okay, thank you. So what do colleagues think about how we can internationalize this? How can we have global convergence, not just for nomenclature, but for device alerts and recalls? Is there any prospect And I could ask the EMA, with your expertise, Miguel, with databases and concerns about cybersecurity and safety and the difficulty of sharing data between the US and Europe. But wouldn't it make sense if this was all available in a single database worldwide?
Actually, I will have apologies. I might have some difficulties replying that question. It's not my area of expertise. I would generally say that I would fully agree with that, but the specifics are a little bit more challenging, and probably the EMEA has specific teams handling the IT issues, the coding issues. So we have very specialized teams working on those. So
okay,
very difficult for me to make an informed comment.
It's almost a philosophical question that we need more experts and more software engineers and everyone else to integrate all of this worldwide, and not just in Europe, where Enrico and his team are trying to help us with, I think, a very nice tool. Now, we've been joined by Dr. Paul Piscoi from the European Commission. And welcome, Paul. I don't know if you have been able to follow anything so far, or if you would like to give us a brief comment on the need for a standardized working database to extract signals from safety alerts and recalls, such as the one that Enrico Caiani has been developed. Please let us know if you would like to comment.
Thanks a lot, Professor Fraser. I think I can say a few words. Thousand apologies for not being able to be here on time. We had another meeting that required my presence. I think that's the whole concept and the whole matter of signals and trends is essential for safety of medical devices in Europe. I'll give you some examples. The famous PIP case, the falsified breast implants, was discovered by plastic surgeons that just saw that the time to rupture was earlier than expected. Surgical meshes, we could have maybe captured much earlier this case and not suffered the debacle that the crisis brought about by the meshes was bringing to the women and the regulators all over the world. Because, for instance, we saw and we had a mesh extrusion about 2 times more frequent than the expected extrusion rate, and maybe the most famous of them all, the metal-on-metal hip implants, which was hailed as a very good life-saving. By that I mean life-enabling technology for young people, and then proved to be 8-9 years later a disaster, and was found in a registry by this signals and trends. So this case is actually made it into a requirement of the EU regulation that asks that in the future database of medical devices, Yoganathan, we have electronic tools like these ones to be able to determine, to find such signals and trends. And I'd say that the effort that Professor Caiani and EU undertook in the research of such types of software is essential for our future better functioning. So I salute the effort, and personally I think it's enormously valuable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And before we finish, I just want to refer to probably questions, one that we can answer very quickly and one that we probably can't answer at all. The first one from Matthias Keilstedt is whether the clinical evaluation consultation procedure is linked to the HTA regulation. And I think the answer is no. There's no direct link currently. If I'm wrong, Miguel, please come in. And then secondly, David Epstein asking you, Enrico and Yijun, whether when you assess the number of reports and events, you have any means to detect and interpret them, knowing the denominator, the number of devices that have been put in. And I suspect the answer to that is also no. that currently this data is not collected and available as part of the whole process. Is that correct, Enrico? Yes, so that's a correct answer for that. And Miguel, maybe Paul's going to answer the comment about HTA.
I don't know, we can do it both. I don't know, Miguel, if you wish to, I can start. There is only an indirect link. The HTA regulation foresees that the devices which were selected to receive an opinion from the expert panels under the CCP will be those that the committee dealing with the joint assessment under the HTA may select for the joint assessments. And secondary, there is a mechanism of sharing of the information, which is not necessarily needed directly through the panels themselves, because there is also in one of the annexes the duty that the manufacturer makes available the information which are also made available to the panels. So there are actually two highways for flowing of this information. But to my knowledge, these are the two indirect links. Maybe Miguel, if you wish to add something.
Thank you, Paul. I think you've pretty much covered, and in fact, I think that the main one would be if some of those mechanisms would trigger criterion 3 for an opinion, then that's where we would see this link really flowing from vigilance. Thank you. Nothing to add.
So we've had an excellent discussion, I think, and I would like to thank everyone for their participation in this webinar. From the perspective of CoreMD, I know that this work will continue. And Enrico, I think you would endorse me in saying that any colleagues who are online who are interested in exploring it further can easily contact you at the Politecnico di Milano, because we're open to collaborations and discussion to develop the best tools and hopefully in the longer term to make them sustainable and indeed to make them global in some way, if in future that becomes feasible with all the challenges being addressed. And you agree with that? You want to have a final comment, or are you happy with that, Enrico? So thank you very much, and thank you, everyone, and we will see you at the next webinar. Good night, everyone.